The most famous line of her career was that she couldn't be hurt, and the whole world decided to believe it about the real girl, too.
Yeah, it is a really profound kind of typecasting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like when the line between the invincible character you play on TV and the vulnerable human you actually are just gets entirely erased by the culture watching you.
Totally. That was the ultimate lie, and it's the absolute center of what we are pulling apart today. I mean, you've seen Hayden Panettiere on your screen, right? You probably watched her grow up.
Well, definitely.
But what you were watching wasn't a person, it was a product. So today we are doing a deep dive into her memoir, This Is Me, A Reckoning. And we are looking at this text through a very specific, very revealing lens.
Right, the performance of okayness.
Exactly. We want to explore how a child who was raised under the literal glare of studio lights learned early on that being fine wasn't just like a mood. It wasn't a personality trait.
No, it was the product.
Yes. Being fine was the literal product she was paid to manufacture and deliver to the world.
Which brings us to the core thesis we need to prove as we work through all this material today. Because the easy narrative, the one the tabloids have been selling you for 15 years, is that fame broke Hayden Panettiere.
The tragic child star trope, we've heard it a million times.
Right. But when you examine her life through the mechanics of this book, you realize that narrative is it's entirely backward. Fame didn't break her. Fame hired her to play indestructible girls.
Wow. Yeah.
The depression, the drinking, the pills, none of that was the performance failing. All of that was simply the bill for that performance coming due.
Yeah.
So the reckoning she writes about, it isn't a simple recovery story.
No, it's not at all.
It's this earth-shattering realization that the mask she wore to survive wasn't just a defense mechanism, it was her job.
So let's start at the absolute beginning, because when we say she was hired early, we aren't talking about, like, a high school drama club.
Not at all.
We are talking about infancy. I want to drop you right into the scene from the text and just try to picture the sensory reality of it. It is pre-dawn in New York City in 1990. The city is freezing, it's dark, it's damp, and Hayden is 8 months old.
8 months. Just a baby.
Literally an infant. She is at a casting call for Michelin tires. Her mother has stripped her down to her diaper in this drafty room and placed her inside an actual massive rubber tire.
Oh my.
And because she's an infant, her neck muscles can barely support her. Her giant baby head is bobbing around like a balloon on a string, and her body is just swaying unsteadily back and forth against the heavy tread of the tire.
That sounds terrifying, honestly.
It is. And her mother is hovering just out of frame, whispering, basically praying she doesn't fall and crack her skull on the floor. Now, she didn't get that specific part, but the die was cast. By 11 months old, she books a play school commercial.
Wow.
Her very first memory, the first cognitive imprint of her entire life, is watching a toy train go around a track on a brightly lit commercial set.
Let's analyze the mechanics of what is happening in that room, though. The foundation of her entire psychological framework is being laid down before she can even speak.
Right.
The biological entity we call Hayden is being treated as a commercial commodity before the concept of consent can even begin to form in her developing brain.
It's wild when you phrase it like that.
I mean, think about what a casting director is looking for in an 8-month-old. They aren't looking for talent. They're looking for compliance.
Exactly. Her primary value to the adults holding the clipboards was her ability to not cry.
Yes. She was hired because she was miraculously unbothered by cold rooms, by bright lights, and by strangers manhandling her. Her value was her ability to suppress normal infant distress, to be quote-unquote professional, and to deliver whatever reaction the adult in the room demanded on cue.
And you see how that expectation just calcifies as she gets older. Fast forward a decade. She's 11 years old. She's up for the role of Cheryl Yost in the massive Disney film. Remember the Titans?
Oh, such a huge movie.
Huge. But her agent is having to beg for the audition because the casting director assumes she's just this polished pageant kid. They actually compare her look to John Benet Ramsey, which
is a horrifying parallel of childhood commodification all on its own.
Right. Just chilling. So the pressure is immense to prove she can be rough and tumble. But right before she flies out to Los Angeles for the audition, she's playing at a water park.
Like a normal 11-year-old.
Exactly. She goes down a slide, hits the concrete bottom, and completely shreds her knuckles. They are bloody, ripped open, and throbbing. She is sobbing uncontrollably.
Oh, man.
And she isn't just crying because of the physical pain. She is crying because she believes she has ruined the audition.
Which is so sad.
So what does her mother do? She doesn't take her to the doctor or tell her to rest. She wraps those bloody hands tightly in gauze and Band-Aids, drives her to buy oversized, baggy boys' clothes, and tells her, they want a tomboy. We'll give them a tomboy.
Just push through the pain.
Yep.
Hayden walks into that audition room with bleeding knuckles, suppressing the pain, and channels this fierce, fearless attitude. She uses the injury as a prop, and she books the movie.
The mechanism of reward here is deeply insidious, right? Look at what her developing brain is learning in that moment.
What do you mean?
Well, the physical reality of her pain, the bloody knuckles, is completely subverted by the professional requirement to perform. The adults in the room, both her mother and the casting directors, are actively rewarding the suppression of her actual childhood reality.
Oh, wow. Yeah. They're validating the character over the person.
Exactly. They are validating the character she can project over the pain she is actually experiencing. When you are rewarded with a multi-million-dollar movie role for hiding your bleeding hands, you learn a very permanent lesson. Your pain is irrelevant. Your ability to perform through it is your only currency.
Which creates this incredible isolating dissonance. Because while all this Hollywood success is happening, she's actually living in a very quiet, affluent suburb outside of New York City called Sneeden's Landing.
It's this idyllic, artsy enclave. People like Bill Murray and Al Pacino live there. But for Hayden, middle school in Sneeden's Landing is a nightmare.
Kids can be brutal.
Oh, ruthless. She is getting bullied by kids who are jealous or just cruel. She's having crumpled up notes shoved at her in the hallways that say things like, your acting sucks.
Ugh, that's awful.
And this is the detail that breaks my heart. She doesn't throw them away. She takes those cruel notes home, places them meticulously in a binder, and hides them under her bed.
Like she's collecting the evidence of why she's not good enough.
Right. She sleeps over them, letting them act as this constant, radiating seed of insecurity. It gets so bad that her dad actually pulls her aside, sees the toll it's taking, and offers her a clean way out.
He tells her she can quit, right?
Yeah. He says, we don't care about the acting, we care about you. You can just stay home and be a normal kid. But she refuses. She won't take the exit ramp.
See, that's fascinating.
Now, wait, looking at that, my instinct is to complicate this narrative a little bit, because in the text, she is remarkably honest about her own agency. She admits she was a willful child.
Right, she wasn't a passive victim.
Exactly. She loved the adrenaline of the set. She loved the craft. If she wasn't being dragged kicking and screaming, and her father explicitly gave her permission to quit, aren't we kind of removing her agency by saying she was forced into this? I mean, didn't she actively choose the performance?
It's a really critical distinction to make, but we have to evaluate the nature of choice for a developing mind. Yes, she loved the rush. But enjoying the dopamine hit of adult approval, like the applause of a director at age 5 or the validation of a massive paycheck at age 11, that is not the same thing as informed consent.
Okay, that's a fair point.
A pre-adolescent brain physically cannot comprehend the long-term psychological toll of fusing their entire identity to public consumption. The profound danger here isn't that she hated it and was a prisoner. The much deeper danger is that she loved it so intensely that she fused her entire sense of self-worth to the applause. She learned, on a cellular level, that love, safety, and validation were strictly conditional on her performance.
It makes me think about how we develop technology, oddly enough.
How so?
If you look at this through the lens of a software product launch, it's like a company releasing a massive new operating system where the underlying code is still actively being written.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Right. It's buggy, it's incomplete, it's fragile. But the public is already demanding the flawless final version. They are banging on the servers, so the developers just keep slapping superficial patches on the interface to make it look highly functional from the outside, while the core architecture is crumbling under the traffic.
That is a perfect analogy.
She learned incredibly early that the performance of okayness is the patch that keeps the servers running.
And the traffic on those servers is about to increase exponentially. I mean, that public demand for the flawless version reaches a terrifying cultural peak when she lands the role that defines her career.
Save the cheerleader, save the world.
Exactly. The tagline for NBC's Heroes.
It was inescapable in 2006.
It really was. So let's look at the reality of navigating the world under that specific spotlight. She is 17 years old, the absolute center of pop culture.
Right.
She is trying to navigate a crowded industry event in Los Angeles, just trying to walk from a car to a door through a swarm of paparazzi. Suddenly, she feels a sharp physical pain in the back of her leg.
A kick, right.
Yes, a grown man, a photographer, has literally kicked her. Hard. And as she winces, as the shock registers and she turns around, the photographer has his massive camera lens raised right in her face and yells, "Hi, Hayden, smile."
That makes my blood boil.
It's disgusting. He intentionally inflicted physical pain just to provoke an unscripted reaction, hoping to capture a profitable photo of America's sweetheart looking angry or out of control.
And we have to remember the cultural context of what she was famous for at that exact moment. On Heroes, she played Claire Bennett, a high school cheerleader whose superpower was cellular regeneration.
Right, she could heal from anything.
Anything. She hurled herself off 80-foot oil rigs. She survived fires. She literally snapped her own broken bones back into place on primetime television. And the American public aided enthusiastically by a highly predatory media landscape, took that fictional indestructibility and grafted it onto the real-life teenager.
It's like they couldn't separate the two.
They looked at a 17-year-old girl and decided she was a superhero. So they tested her boundaries constantly, physically and emotionally, just to see if she would break.
To fully understand the cruelty of that moment, you really have to understand the media ecosystem of the mid-2000s. This was the era of the circle of shame.
Oh, God, the tabloid circles.
Yes. Tabloids and early gossip blogs were making millions by publishing telephoto images of teenage girls at the beach, literally drawing thick yellow circles around perceived flaws, cellulite, a stray hair, a blemish. It was an industry built on the gleeful public dissection of young women.
It was so toxic.
She explicitly talks about how she couldn't even go to the beach with her friends. The culture wanted to build her up as the ultimate symbol of American purity. But they also desperately, pathologically, wanted to see the cheerleader bleed.
Yeah.
And when that paparazzo kicked her, what were her options? She couldn't press charges. She couldn't scream at him because the moment she did, he gets the photo he wants, and she is plastered on the cover of Us Weekly as a raging, out-of-control teenager.
So she's trapped. The ecosystem ensures she has no recourse.
None. So what does she do? She swallowed the pain. She forced a smile. She maintained the performance.
And the pressure to maintain that performance wasn't just this abstract cultural expectation. It was legally binding. Right at the height of this frenzy, she signs a massive multi-million-dollar endorsement contract with Neutrogena.
Oh, that's right. The face of the brand.
Yeah, she becomes a literal face of a brand whose entire identity is built on being squeaky clean, pure, fresh, and natural. And corporate contracts of that magnitude come with incredibly strict morality clauses.
You step out of line, you lose the millions.
Exactly. This isn't just about washing her face on camera. She had to meticulously perform the role of the innocent, all-American sweetheart 24/7. Now imagine being 18 in Hollywood during that specific era.
It was wild.
She talks about going to clubs like Les Deux, which, for anyone who didn't live through 2000s MTV reality culture, was the absolute epicenter of toxic Hollywood nightlife. It was where Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan, and the paparazzi all collided in this sweaty, chaotic velvet rope circus.
Literal circus.
And Hayden is inside this environment, but she is terrified. She's terrified of holding a red Solo cup in a photo. She is hyper-analyzing her outfits, terrified of showing too much skin. She is acutely aware every second of the day that she is on the clock playing the role of Hayden Panettiere Neutrogena girl.
The surveillance was total. It was coming from all sides. The paparazzi were financially incentivized to catch her failing, and her corporate sponsors were financially demanding she project perfection.
She was trapped.
Completely. She was trapped in an impossible standard, acting as the guarantor for millions of dollars of other people's money, all resting on the behavior of a teenager.
Okay, but wait, I want to challenge the assumption that this was entirely negative. Because as I read the book, I couldn't help but notice that she didn't end up like the rest of the women the media cruelly dubbed the messy generation.
What do you mean?
Well, she wasn't getting DUIs on the Pacific Coast Highway. She wasn't crashing cars. She wasn't being photographed crying outside of courthouses. Given how many child stars of that exact era were consumed by the nightlife, didn't this intense pressure, the morality clauses, the fear of the paparazzi, the rigid expectations, didn't it actually act as a guardrail?
Like it protected her?
Yeah, didn't it keep her safe from going completely off the rails publicly?
It's a very common way to view high-functioning individuals, but the text forces us to reject that premise entirely. It didn't keep her safe. It simply dictated the direction of the destruction.
Okay, explain that.
It forced the collapse inward. Let's step away from the cliché of the pressure cooker for a moment. Think of her life as a form of architectural facadism.
Architectural facadism.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a beautiful historic building in a city, and from the street, the masonry in the windows look absolutely perfect and pristine?
Sure.
But if you walk around back, you realize the entire inside of the building has been gutted, bulldozed to the dirt, and the only thing holding up that beautiful front wall is a massive, hidden scaffold of steel girders.
Oh, wow.
That was her life. She didn't rebel publicly because the scaffolding of her obligations, her mom, her team, Neutrogena, her fans, was so rigid she couldn't afford to let it fall. The indestructible girl on television was perfectly mirrored by the indestructible teen on the red carpet. The facade was holding flawlessly, but internally she was being completely hollowed out.
That image of the gutted building is chilling. And where does that facade finally start to show cracks? It fractures when she takes a role that forces her to look at her own internal reality.
The Nashville years.
Right. This brings us to one of the most twisted, meta-psychological experiences detailed in the entire memoir, the cruel mirror of Nashville.
It honestly reads like a psychological horror story, masquerading as a primetime country music soap opera.
Put yourself in her shoes for a second. You're living in Tennessee. It's season 4 of Nashville. You are sitting in your trailer, opening the script for the new season for your character, Juliet Barnes.
Okay.
And as you read the pages, you realize you are staring directly into a funhouse mirror. The writers have scripted Juliet to suffer from severe, debilitating postpartum depression.
That's exactly what she was dealing with.
Exactly. They've written her to have an escalating alcohol and pill problem. They've written her a looming divorce. Her character is acting erratic. She is struggling to bond with her child. She is fighting with everyone in her orbit.
It's uncanny.
And Hayden is reading these exact words while actively, in her real private life, suffering from severe, undiagnosed postpartum depression, an escalating alcohol and pill dependency, and the crumbling of her own relationship.
The cosmic cruelty of that irony is just breathtaking. You have to look at the mechanics of television writing, Writers' rooms mine the real lives of their actors all the time. They observe a quirk, a mood, a tension, and they weave it into the script.
Do you think they knew?
Whether they intentionally harvested her pain or it was just a devastating coincidence, the result is the same. The art was explicitly naming a private agony that she felt completely barred from confessing to the public.
That's so heavy.
Her actual lived trauma was being packaged, lit, scored with country music, and sold to advertisers as primetime tabloid drama. The boundary between the fictional character she was paid to embody and the reality she was desperately trying to survive completely collapsed.
Yeah, she writes this line that really haunts me. She says, "I dove headfirst into my own hell. I had to live through it twice. First at home, as Hayden, and then in front of millions as Juliet."
Living it twice, that is a waking nightmare.
And the physical toll this takes on her body is heartbreaking. We have to talk about her real-life pregnancy leading up to this storyline. She put on 40 pounds. Which, she notes with total clarity, is a completely normal, healthy amount of weight to gain while growing a human being.
Of course it is.
But her body changed drastically. She lost her petite frame. And this entire time, the paparazzi are hounding her in Hawaii, in Nashville, everywhere. A major tabloid literally published a telephoto swimsuit photo of her from a vacation with the actual headline, "Fat Vagina."
Which just highlights the absolute depravity of the media cycle she was trapped in. It's not just an invasion of privacy, it's the intentional public humiliation of a pregnant woman's changing body.
Vile doesn't even begin to cover it. So she is dealing with this intense public shaming, feeling completely alienated from her own body, suffering from intense body dysmorphia. And then she has to go back to the set of Nashville, feeling bloated, exhausted, and internally miserable. And she has to stand in front of costume designers for hours. She makes a point to say she loved the costume department. They were wonderful people. But she describes the profound, skin-crawling shame of having multiple hands all over her, taking measurements.
Trying to squeeze her into Juliet Barnes' glamorous wardrobe.
Exactly. Squeezing her into these skin-tight sequin dresses while she felt like her entire world was dying inside.
It forces us to ask a really difficult question about the nature of the acting profession itself and how it handles human psychology.
See, that's where my mind went immediately, because if you know anything about the craft of acting, specifically method acting, utilizing real-world pain is considered the gold standard.
Right, pull from your real grief.
Yeah, use it to make the performance authentic. So part of me wonders, Couldn't playing Juliet Barnes going through PPD actually have been deeply cathartic for her? Like a safe, controlled sandbox where she was allowed to just scream, cry, and let the pain out and actually get an Emmy nomination for it.
It's a very intuitive assumption.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at the mechanics of trauma, we have to reject it in this specific context.
Why?
Because catharsis requires a boundary. It requires a safe harbor. If you use your grief for a scene, the therapeutic value comes from the director yelling, "Cut!" and you walking off set back to a stable, supportive reality where you can decompress.
Ah, and she didn't have that.
Hayden didn't have a safe harbor to return to. She was pouring her real trauma out for the cameras and then returning to a massive empty house, self-medicating in secret and waking up to do it all over again.
Wow.
It wasn't therapy. It was a psychological loop of torture. When you are utilizing active, untreated, escalating trauma for corporate entertainment, you aren't processing it. You are just monetizing an open wound.
The performance of okayness had become so deeply, inextricably intertwined with her reality that she was literally cashing checks for performing her own psychological collapse.
Yep.
And that inability to separate the performance from reality leads to the most misunderstood, heavily scrutinized chapter of her life. The moment the public judged her most harshly for the impossible math of motherhood.
If there is one chapter in this text that requires a complete reframing of the public narrative, it is this one. It handles the agonizing complexities of maternal duty with just devastating clarity.
I want to set this scene with absolute precision because the tension is palpable. We are no longer in Hollywood or Nashville. We are thousands of miles away in a nondescript, quiet restaurant in Kiev, Ukraine.
Such a stark contrast.
Totally jarring. They are sitting in the back, obscured from the rest of the diners behind heavy velvet curtains. The bright lights of her past versus this heavy, stoic Eastern European room. It's just Hayden, her dad, Vladimir Klitschko, and a group of Vladimir's unsmiling associates and lawyers.
And Vlad slides the papers across the table.
Right. He slides a thick stack of papers across the table. They are legally binding documents translated meticulously into both English and Ukrainian. They are custody papers.
Asking for full primary custody.
Yes. To raise their 3-year-old daughter, Kaya, in Europe. Hayden reaches out, picks up the pen, and her hands are shaking so violently she has to grip the barrel until her knuckles turn white just to control the ink. And right there, sitting behind those velvet curtains, she signs away primary custody of her only child.
And we all remember what the public verdict was. The speed and viciousness with which the internet and the tabloids moved was terrifying. They branded her an unfit monster.
A party girl who abandoned her child.
Exactly. But the private reality, the deeply painful internal math she was doing in that quiet restaurant in Kiev, reveals a profoundly different calculus. It's the agonizing math of realizing that stepping back to protect your child is sometimes more maternal than stepping forward to possess them.
She gives us full access to her internal monologue in that exact moment, and it is chilling in its pragmatism. She knew exactly the kind of leverage she had. She explicitly writes that she could start a fire so fucking fast.
Because she had the resources.
Yes. She was a wealthy American celebrity. She could have hired the most vicious family lawyers in the country. She could have waged a brutal, scorched earth, years-long international legal war in multiple jurisdictions. She had the financial resources. She had the fury. But as she gripped that pen, she didn't think about her pride. She remembered her own childhood.
Exactly. She played out the tape. She remembered the paparazzi ambushes hiding in the bushes. She remembered the visceral lack of safety in her own home. She remembered the screaming matches between her parents over money and careers.
It's all connected.
It is. She looked objectively at her current reality. She was in the fragile early stages of recovery. Her mental health was a house of cards. And she looked at Vladimir's reality. He was offering a life in Europe, behind high walls, completely insulated from the American tabloid machine. He was offering stability.
She writes this paragraph that just stops you in your tracks. She says, "Could I fight Lad? Sure. Did I want to? Yes. But should I? No. I couldn't do it to my Kaya."
Such a powerful realization.
She signed those papers so her daughter would have a peaceful, secure life out of the spotlight. She knew it meant breaking her own heart, and she knew it meant entirely destroying her own public image, but she did it anyway.
But if we look at the overarching theme of her life, the indestructible girl, this moment presents a massive contradiction.
You know, I actually got angry on her behalf reading this.
Why?
Because, wait, isn't giving up custody the ultimate failure of this indestructible persona she'd spent her whole life building? Her entire brand, her survival mechanism from the Michelin tire onward, was fighting for what she wanted, proving she couldn't be broken, never letting them see her cry. Doesn't surrendering her child without a fight prove that the industry finally broke her?
I argue the exact opposite. If you truly understand the mechanics of what she did, this moment in Kiev was the most indestructible thing she ever accomplished. Yes. Everything else before the acting, the smiling through the paparazzi kicks, the Neutrogena purity, the red carpets, it was all performance. Taking the unimaginable permanent public hit of being labeled a bad mom, absorbing all of that societal vitriol and hatred without defending herself in the press, solely to shield her daughter from the trauma of a legal battle.
Yeah.
That isn't breaking. That is a profound, raw, agonizing act of maternal strength. She became the villain so her daughter could have peace.
Think about that for a second. Think about a time in your own life when you took the blame for a mistake at work or let someone win an argument just to protect someone you cared about. Now magnify that by 1,000,000 and put it on the front page of the internet.
It's an unimaginable burden.
To keep her daughter safe, she deliberately let the world assume that the mask of the perfect mother had failed completely. She stood there and took the bullets. But taking those bullets, living with the silence of an empty house without her child, required a massive amount of numbing agent.
Which brings us to the actual mechanism of her survival during this era.
Addiction. We have to completely rewire how we view her substance abuse because the book makes it very, very clear. This was not a tragic party girl rebellion.
No, not at all.
Drop into this moment with her. It's 6 a.m. in her bedroom. The sun isn't even fully up yet. Her alarm clock is ringing like a jackhammer. She opens her eyes, and before she even sits up, her hands are shaking uncontrollably. The room is spinning. The anxiety is a physical weight on her chest.
The physical withdrawal is setting in.
Right. Her very first thought isn't about her script or schedule or even her family. Her first conscious thought is alcohol. She immediately gets out of bed, walks to the pantry, and digs around to find these tiny 3-ounce plastic bottles of Fireball whiskey.
The cheap ones from the gas station.
Exactly. She meticulously hides them from Vladimir all over the house. She unscrews the cap and takes a warm swig of cinnamon whiskey at 6 in the morning. And she isn't doing it to get wasted.
No.
She is doing it just to stop the spinning. She is doing it just to stop the terrifying physical withdrawal so she can physically get dressed, get in the car, and go to work.
That is the crucial distinction we must make. This is addiction as pure, desperate maintenance. The alcohol and later the opiates and the stimulants were the literal biochemical upkeep cost of the I'm fine mask.
The upkeep cost, I like that phrasing.
When your entire life relies on your ability to deliver a performance and your internal reality is collapsing, you have to bridge that gap with chemicals. She wasn't drinking to chase a high. She was drinking to achieve baseline functionality.
To deliver the product.
Yes, to deliver the product that the studio, the crew, and her family demanded. The Fireball wasn't a party. It was the fuel required to keep an engine that was actively on fire running for another 12 hours.
And her early attempts at getting help were so totally disconnected from the reality of her disease. She writes about her first stint in rehab. It wasn't a gritty 12-step facility. It was this VIP, ultra-exclusive European clinic.
Oh, right, the luxury rehab.
It was wildly expensive. She had a literal army of private doctors. She was treated like absolute royalty. It was basically a luxury hotel completely removed from the stressors of the real world. And she leaves that facility with an official diagnosis of postpartum depression, but she is completely in denial about the physical addiction to alcohol.
Right, she thought she was above it.
She actually has this thought process where she tells herself, a tough girl like me can't be taken down by a liquid.
That VIP rehab experience is so revealing about the bubble she lived in. It reinforced her specialness, her separateness from the rest of humanity. It didn't force her to confront the grim reality of her physical dependency because she was still being treated as a precious commodity, a VIP client, rather than a patient in a life-or-death fight for survival.
Which brings us to the complicity of the environment around her.
Well,
see, this is the part of the book that made my jaw drop. She admits, in print, that she was regularly showing up to work on the set of Nashville smelling like vodka. She thought vodka was odorless, which is classic desperate addict logic, but of course everyone could smell it seeping out of her pores.
You can't hide that.
She was holding up production. She was missing whole days of filming because she couldn't function. And I just kept asking the text, wait, Why didn't anyone stop her? You have hundreds of people on set. Why wasn't there an intervention? Why did the director call action instead of calling a doctor?
Because you have to understand the dark, symbiotic financial reality of Hollywood enabling. Let's look at the mechanics of a television set. An episode of a network drama like Nashville costs millions of dollars to produce. You have hundreds of crew members, gaffers, grips, caterers, makeup artists who rely on their daily rate to pay their mortgages.
Right.
When you, the lead actress, are the primary product that pays all those salaries, the ecosystem is financially designed to protect the product over the person. Intervening means halting production.
And halting production costs money.
Exactly. Halting production means the studio loses ad revenue, the crew gets sent home without pay, and the people who rock the boat get fired for causing a delay. Her team, the crew, the executives, they propped her up out of a mix of blind allegiance and very real economic fear.
Wow.
They needed the performance of Juliette Barnes to continue more than they needed Hayden Panettiere to be healthy. The financial structure of Hollywood inherently demands that the silence becomes complicity.
It's terrifying. The indestructible girl was internally burning to the ground, using literal liquid fuel to keep the engine running for the cameras, while hundreds of people watched the smoke and did nothing.
And that level of internal destruction, that isolation, made her incredibly vulnerable to external danger.
Yes. This is where the story takes its darkest turn.
We need to examine how someone trained their entire life to manage PR, to look composed on a red carpet, navigates the horrific reality of domestic violence.
The scenes she describes with her ex-boyfriend, Brian Hickerson, are harrowing. She is trapped in a toxic, escalatingly abusive relationship. She describes a night where there is a violent disturbance at their home. It is loud enough and terrifying enough that the neighbors hear the screaming and call 911.
The neighbors called the police.
Yes. Hayden is inside, and she hears the police sirens approaching her driveway. Now, basic survival instinct would say, run to the door, throw it open, run to the police, and get to safety.
Right, run toward the help.
But what does Hayden do? She slinks down onto the floor. She hides. She hides from the police who are there to rescue her. She is more terrified of the cops seeing the reality of her bruised and battered life than she is of the man who just assaulted her.
We have to unpack the profound psychology of that moment. How does someone stay inside such violent harm? When your entire existence, from the age of 8 months old in that Michelin tire, has been built on managing your image, controlling the narrative, and projecting total wellness, the shame of public failure becomes a monster far more terrifying than physical pain.
The fear of the headline?
Exactly. The fear of a TMZ headline reading Hayden's domestic dispute, the fear of losing her endorsements, the fear of shattering the illusion. It completely overrides the immediate biological fear of private violence. The performance of okayness dictates that you must hide the brokenness at all costs, even if keeping the secret endangers your life.
And the mental gymnastics she performed to rationalize staying with him are heartbreakingly common, but amplified by her unique trauma. She explicitly says she split Brian into two entirely different people in her mind.
The split personality rationalization.
Right. There was the real Brian, the charismatic guy who loved dogs, who rode motorcycles, who shared her star signs, who she felt uniquely understood her dark, messy side. And then there was this dissociative Mr. Hyde character who committed the violence when he drank.
Right.
She convinced herself that this wasn't abuse, it was a mental health issue. And because she was the ultimate fixer, she believed that if she could just manage his environment, fix his mental health, she would get the real Brian back permanently.
It's a textbook trauma bond, yes. But it's amplified by her lifelong role as a performer. She had spent 20 years managing the unmanageable in her career, so she falsely believed she could manage the unmanageable in her living room.
But wait, I have to push back here because reading this, the contrast is glaring. My immediate reaction was just total confusion.
Why?
Because this is the same woman who we just established is a fighter. She literally says in the book, I will battle till I'm black and blue for anyone I love, and I will fight like hell for myself. She has a notoriously fiery temper. She is fiercely protective. So why did she freeze for so long with Brian? Why didn't that fiery temper ignite to protect herself?
The book offers a chilling, devastating detail that answers this directly. She didn't freeze out of weakness. She froze out of a terrifying level of self-awareness.
What do you mean?
She writes that she knew her base instincts were so incredibly powerful, her innate fight-or-flight response was so fierce that if she ever fully engaged and fought back against him in the heat of the moment, she might literally kill him in self-defense.
Oh my.
Let that reality sink in. She stayed frozen, she absorbed the physical abuse to prevent a fatal outcome. The ultimate tragic performance of okayness was protecting her abuser from her own defensive rage, to protect the image of her life, and to prevent a tragedy she knew she couldn't live with.
That is just, it takes your breath away. She absorbed the violence to control the blast radius.
Exactly.
And it perfectly leads into this recurring theme of her life, how she was incredibly, fiercely capable of fighting for others, but systematically unable to fight for herself.
The dichotomy between her highly public activism and her intensely private victimization is stark.
Right. Throughout all of this private torment, through the addiction, the abuse, the depression, she is finding profound purpose in global activism. She isn't just cutting checks at charity galas. She travels to the Cove in Taiji, Japan, to fight against the brutal slaughter of dolphins.
She was right there on the front lines.
She is physically putting her body between the hunters and the animals, getting incredibly dangerous footage. She is literally chased out of the country under threat of arrest by the Japanese government. She is a fearless advocate for animal rights. And similarly, she acts as the ultimate defender of her family's public image, taking the hits so her parents or her partners don't have to.
Which points directly back to her core childhood trauma.
Yeah.
She was deeply capable of aiming her protective rage outward. She could fight the dolphin hunters with the fury of a superhero. She could fight to protect Kiev from the trauma of a custody war. She could fight to keep her parents' secrets hidden from the press.
But not herself.
No. Because her core belief was that her own pain was irrelevant as long as she was performing, she seemed entirely unable to aim that protective rage inward to save herself.
You see this dynamic even in how she writes the memoir itself. Take how she frames her relationship with Vladimir. She recounts this incredibly painful conversation where she finally confesses to him that she is miserable, that she thinks she has postpartum depression.
Right, and his response was lacking.
To put it mildly, he looks at her and essentially says that happiness is a choice, and she just needs to work hard to be happy, which is an incredibly dismissive, medically ignorant, and damaging thing to say to someone suffering from a clinical chemical imbalance.
Absolutely.
Yet in the very same chapter, she bends over backward to praise him. She calls him a wonderful human, a true hero, and explicitly takes full responsibility for her own shortcomings as a mother and partner.
It's a striking juxtaposition that reveals how her mind organizes trauma.
I'll be honest, I got genuinely frustrated reading that. I kept thinking, wait, why is she letting the people around her off the hook? She defends Vladimir's stoicism. She defends her stage mom's intense pressure from infancy. She rationalizes her dad's complicity in the Hollywood machine. Why is the indestructible girl constantly taking all the bullets for everyone else's failures?
It feels frustrating as a reader, but psychologically it is the exact symptom of her condition. The indestructible girl's final, most deeply entrenched defense mechanism is absorbing all the blame.
How does that help her?
Let's examine the logic of trauma. If the dysfunction in her life is everyone else's fault, if her parents exploited her, if the industry broke her, if her partners failed her, then she is a helpless victim of circumstance. She has no power.
Okay, I see.
But if she takes the blame, if her mom was just pushing her to be her best, if Vlad was just being stoic and she was too sensitive, if her addiction is solely her own moral failing, then she maintains the illusion of control. Absorbing the blame is how she keeps the narrative tidy. It's the ultimate performance. I am the problem, which means I can fix it.
Wow. That makes so much sense. She could save the cheerleader, she could save her family, she could save the whales, but she was never taught how to save herself because she was too busy convincing the world she didn't need saving.
Exactly.
So what finally breaks the pattern? What stops the performance once and for all? It wasn't rehab. It wasn't the police. It wasn't Hollywood. It was the wound that cannot be performed away.
We arrive at the emotional climax of her life and of the text, the life quake.
It's early spring, present day. She is living a quiet life with her dad in Rockland County, just trying to heal, trying to find a baseline. She's taking long walks, escaping into fantasy novels. But every time she walks through the house, she's surrounded by these vibrant, deeply expressive, happy paintings on the walls.
Jansen's paintings.
Yes, they were painted by her younger brother, Jansen. Jansen tragically suddenly died in February of 2023. She writes that his art is so present in the house and the grief is so sharp, so suffocating, that she constantly feels like he might just walk into the room at any second with a shit-eating grin on his face.
Jansen's death is what she calls a life quake. A disruption so massive, so tectonic, that it forces a total evolution of the self.
Because she can't act her way out of it.
Exactly. Up until this point, she had found ways to perform through everything. She acted through the middle school bullying. She drank her way through the postpartum depression. She PR managed her way through the domestic abuse. She always found a patch for the software. But the sudden death of her brother, that is a biological, spiritual wound so profound and so permanent that no amount of acting, no amount of Fireball whiskey, and no amount of PR spin can perform it away.
It demands the absolute truth. She mentions David Kessler in the book. He's the author who expanded on the stages of grief and added the sixth stage, meaning.
Right, finding meaning in the pain.
Kessler argues that grief isn't just about acceptance. It's about finding meaning in the aftermath. Hayden writes that all the heartaches she endured brought her to a place of deep empathy, but it was the profound, shattering grief of losing Jansen that ultimately forced this book, this reckoning, into existence. She had to finally tell the truth, to stop the performance, because the grief left absolutely no room for the mask.
But notice how she handles this conclusion. It is a masterclass in resisting the easy narrative.
You know, that's exactly what stood out to me, because usually these celebrity memoirs follow a very strict formula.
Oh, the hero's journey.
Right. It's the hero's journey. They hit rock bottom, they go to a beautiful rehab, they have an epiphany, and the book ends with a triumphant victory lap. I saw the light, I'm cured by my lifestyle brand. This book doesn't feel like that at all.
It doesn't, and that's precisely what makes it an actual reckoning rather than a marketing tool. There is no neat bow here. She explicitly rejects the happily ever after Hollywood ending. She states clearly that she's a complex person whose thoughts can often feel fractured.
She admits she's still a work in progress.
Yes. She openly admits that she will forever be a work in progress, cycling through growth, failure, mistakes, and pain until her last breath. The performance is over not because she achieved some enlightened state of perfection, but because she finally accepted her own brokenness as a permanent state of being.
Which brings us to a counterpoint we have to raise, because I know people listening might be thinking it.
Go for it.
If we sit here and frame her addiction, her struggles, her staying with an abuser, purely as the cost of the job or the inevitable fault of her childhood fame, aren't we just helping her execute a brilliant PR rebrand? Is this a genuine reckoning? Or is it just the next iteration of her public narrative, the newest patch on the software? Where does genuine self-awareness end and Hollywood self-mythology begin?
It's the most critical question you can ask of any memoir, especially from someone trained in PR since infancy. But the text defends itself through radical accountability.
How so?
A PR rebrand requires a victim narrative. It requires smoothing out the ugly edges to make the subject perfectly sympathetic. Hayden refuses to do that. She documents the ugly reality. The 6 a.m. warm vodka, the hiding from the cops while her neighbors listened to her abuse, the exact devastating moment she signed her daughter away. She presses charges against Brian even as she admits her heart is breaking, which is an action in the real world, not just a narrative spin.
So she's not just playing the victim.
Exactly. She isn't rewriting her history to make herself the hero. She is conducting a brutal, honest autopsy on the hero she was forced to play.
An autopsy. That's exactly what it is. It's laying the body of the indestructible girl on the table and examining exactly what killed her. The true reckoning of This Is Me isn't that Hayden Panettiere magically got better. It isn't that she defeated her demons in a montage and emerged victorious. The reckoning is that she finally stopped performing, getting better.
The indestructible girl's real power wasn't in her ability to heal from any wound. It wasn't in her ability to hurl herself off a building or survive the paparazzi or smile through the blinding pain of bleeding knuckles. Her real power was finally standing in front of the world, taking the mask off and admitting that she could break.
And it forces a profound reflection for all of us, doesn't it?
It really does.
It makes you wonder, in your own life, what exhaustion, what secret grief or anxiety are you hiding behind the phrase, "I'm fine"? And what would happen if you finally let yourself stop performing?